With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new city council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor, to runoff elections. Tonight, beyond the rhetoric, we ask the remaining candidates what makes them the right person to lead their district and our city.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation District 8, a joint production of KLRU, Leadership Austin, KUT, and the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'm Jennifer Staten with KUT 90.5, Austin's NPR station. Our discussion tonight will focus on leadership and will be sort of like a job interview. We want to know what skills and qualities each candidate would bring to City Hall. My guests this half hour are running in District 8, Ed Scruggs and Ellen Troxclair. And we invite all of you to tweet along with us. Please use the hashtag CivicSummitD8. District 8 is in southwest Austin. It runs mostly west of Mopac, starting south of Rollingwood. It's centered around the Y at Oak Hill. It extends south to the Hays County line. Some parts of the district are in Hays County. On my left is Ed Scruggs. Ed has lived in Austin for He is the founder of the Circle C Area Democrats and calls himself a neighborhood activist. Running against him is Ellen Troxclair. Ellen is a realtor and small business owner. She began her career working in public policy at the state capitol. And thanks so much to both of you for being here tonight. So the first question for you, which was shared with both of you beforehand, I want to hear what you have learned about yourself over these past 4 months of campaigning that will help you govern. And Ed, we'll start with you for that one.
That will help me govern, I would say. I have more stamina than I could ever imagine, and that this is my true calling. I think working with people in the community, talking to them, listening to them, and acting with them. I always knew that that was a big part of my life, but now it's a part of my life to stay. The drive and energy, it just feeds upon itself. I can't get enough of it because I'm so eager to help folks in the community. I'm thinking of election night. Last Tuesday, I was on my feet for 20 hours, and it was exhausting, but it was the best 20 hours I've ever had. I think it's changed my life for the better, and I look forward to governing.
And Ellen?
Well, I think if you had asked me or told me 7 or 8 months ago that I would ever run for public office, I would have not believed you, because it's never been a personal political ambition of mine to be an elected official, although I've enjoyed being involved in the community and multiple other organizations. So that has been a surprise to me in and of itself, that here I am several months later and being, coming in first place at the election. And I got in this race, I ultimately got motivated to get in this race because I have always looked forward to raising my family in Austin. And my husband and I got to the point where a lot of our conversations started to revolve around the question of whether or not we're going to be able to afford to do that. And so that's what ultimately motivated me to get into the race. And I was so amazed and happy to find out how many people in Southwest Austin felt the same way and have joined our campaign and look forward to having a taxpayer advocate on City Council. So that would be the biggest shock to, or surprise, or thing that I've learned about myself, and I look forward to bringing that voice for taxpayers to City Council.
All right, so I want to run you two through a hypothetical and get your response to a couple questions about that. So here's the hypothetical. So there's pressure on the council as a whole to increase the budget for public safety because of an increase in crime in 2 of the 10 districts. Now, your district has not directly been affected, but you're feeling pressure from neighborhood groups to lobby for increased evening patrol. So the questions: how would you work with APD to decide which districts get more officers. And then if that means delivering to your district what might be unwanted news, maybe news that they don't want to receive, how would you go about communicating that choice back to your constituents? And Ellen, we'll start with you for this one.
Great question. Well, I think a common theme throughout this campaign has been a need for better communication, whether it's better communication between city council members and constituents, or between city council members and the different interest groups, or very important organizations like our police and firemen who serve our city so well. So the first step is reaching out to them, sitting down and having that conversation with them, learning all of the facts, and working together to make an informed decision. And, you know, although we want to do what's best for the city as a whole, it is my job to be an advocate for Southwest Austin. So I'm absolutely going to represent that district's needs while having those conversations with an open mind, and then communicating that effectively with my constituents, always having an open door policy, always letting them know what decisions are being made and the logic behind those decisions.
And Ed?
Well, it's a great question because it brings up the public safety aspect and the budget aspect. They're linked. Public safety is about 70% of the general fund budget, so that's a great question. I think part of the way we handle this is first we get a handle on what is in the budget, where we're having police coverage, for example, and rightfully so, it's going to be focused in the higher crime areas. And I can think of the Runberg area in North Austin, for example. Those folks need help up there, and they deserve it. Now, if they needed more help, if what we were doing there wasn't working, we have an obligation to ask why. Are we focusing on community policing? Are there tactics that we can use that will help? Is it just a manpower problem, or are there other things that we can do? Down in my district, in District 8, people have an interest in public safety, of course. We've had a rise in property crimes, car thefts, break-ins, vandalism. And some people may not think that is a big problem, but trust me, it is. I've had my back window of my van shot out twice within a 6-week period before the holiday once, and it cost thousands of dollars. So a lot of damage does occur. I think working with APD to focus on property crimes and burglaries, they need more resources in that area, obviously, and develop a long-term plan and tailor police coverage to the needs of each district. If we're doing that, the absolute manpower aspect won't matter as much, because if we're doing everything we can with the manpower allotted in the districts, then we'll be able to meet needs. And I think working with APD, we can do that.
All right. The numbers tell us, we know that there are many Austinites who don't vote in city elections. So I'm curious to hear how each of you would explain to a non-voter why they should care about what happens at City Hall. And Ed, if you want to take that one
Well, I've
first.
met many of those non-voters during the campaign, and one of the great things about 10-1 and the great things about this campaign is folks in the Southwest were not engaged with city politics on average. They were upset, perhaps, because there were things they didn't like, but they're so far removed from the core of the city that they can live their lives and just not think much about city government. So when we're going door to door and knocking, I found myself often educating folks and answering their questions about how the city works. Folks didn't know, for example, that EMS was separate from fire, or what the police coverage was, or what the crime rates were. So I think this process is going to bring people together and engage them. Now, we might have to bring some of them kicking and screaming, because this is Texas and it's a non-voting state, and we have a culture, unfortunately, that we need to press hard and improve our civic engagement. This is one way that we can do that. One other factor, I think, is establishing district offices so we're accessible to our people, that they don't have to come all the way downtown and fight the traffic and the hours, et cetera. And that would be a budget-conscious way, using existing facilities that have extra space, no new construction, but just have some regular hours where folks can come in, contact us, maybe meet a staff member, and just share their concerns. So we bring the government to them. I think we have an obligation to do that as well.
And Ellen?
Well, I have been honored to be a part of this new district system that I think in and of itself has had a huge impact in our civic engagement in Southwest Austin. I'll tell you, one of the most amazing people throughout this campaign was a woman who one of my volunteers called while they were making phone calls to tell people about our campaign. And she told my volunteer that she had never voted before. She was 100% blind, and she had never made it to the polls. And after talking to my volunteer about the city council election and why it's so important, she asked her mom to drive her to the poll and to take her to vote for the first time. And we ran into her actually as she was walking in to vote, and she said, "I'm coming to vote for the first time in my life because I wanted to make sure and cast my vote for you." And that had such an incredible impact on me because I felt like already we're making such a difference by just being out there and being a representative for Southwest Austin. I think past that, you know, a reason that we haven't been so engaged in the first place is because we have felt very overlooked by the current city council. A lot of Southwest Austinites feel like we have the highest rate of homeownership. We're footing the bill for a lot of the city services, and we're not seeing a return on that investment in the form of road infrastructure and public safety resources. So I think in order to change that, they have to know that somebody's listening. They have to know that somebody is being held accountable. They have to know that when they write an email or when they make a phone call, there's someone on the other end who's going to give them a response and who's going to take their thoughts into consideration. And that's the kind of public servant that I want to be.
So kind of a question related to 10-1 and the new council setup. So as this district representation takes hold in Austin, this will be the first council elected under this system, people may start to identify even more with the district or the region where they are. And you were saying that seems especially true in District 8 perhaps. So I'm curious to hear from you what you see as maybe some risks, but also maybe some opportunities associated with people maybe thinking of themselves more as being part of a district rather than part of a city. And Ellen, if you want to take that one first.
Well, I think the biggest opportunity is I think it will motivate them to get engaged. I think that they will feel like while under the current city council, a lot of our smaller neighborhood issues have been overlooked. They're going to have someone who lives in that neighborhood who understands what they're going through and who is going to be able to have a phone conversation with them, have a meeting in the district with them. I think the risks of the system, and that's something that we've talked about throughout the campaign, is you don't want to make it all about you at the expense of the entire city as a whole. And in order to overcome that, I think you start with although each district has very unique needs, we share some very important common themes like cost of living, like property taxes, like traffic. And it doesn't matter what part of the city you live in, those things are affecting your constituents. So I think it'll be important for every city council member, regardless of what district they are from, to start with the issues that we really have commonalities and kind of branch out from there.
And Ed?
Well, I think there's an upside and a downside, of course, but I think the positives far outweigh the negatives. District 8 needs an identity. We've said Oak Hill or Southwest Austin for so long. Well, what does that mean? And it turns out it's actually a very diverse area, starting from Zilker Park all the way down Mopac to the south end. And so there are different neighborhoods with different needs. A West Creek, for example, or a Scenic Brook is very different from a Circle C or a Village as a Western Oaks. So there are identities within the district that also need to be tended to, as a matter of fact. But I think the issue of commonalities, the city is really at a critical point, a historic point. The affordability issue strikes everyone across the city in different ways. Everyone has that in common. In our district, the primary factor is property taxes, which hit people very hard. We have the highest rate of home ownership in the city as a percentage. But everyone can relate to that feeling of, what am I going to do? Am I going to be able to stay here? It happens even in our district. So we have that. Transportation is a common issue. Everyone has to get from point A to point B, and sometimes point C, and it's taking longer. So we have many common issues. And what I also try to impress upon people is, you may not think some of these issues affect us, but they do. School district, for example, AISD and their budget problems and educational problems. Primary factor, 52%, I believe, of the property tax bill comes from AISD. And that is a problem that affects everyone. The district almost overlays through the entire city limits. So we have district-wide, city-wide, region-wide issues that any council member needs to focus on and should be able to explain to the folks in their district why this is important to us, because we all pay for that.
So I don't have to tell you all, this was a very busy fall election season, a lot of forums, a lot of debates. You all spent a lot of time together. This is obviously not the first time you've been on the stage together. So I'm curious to hear from each of you what you've learned from your opponent during this process. Ed, if you want to take that one
Well, and I'll be
first.
very truthful. I know from Ellen I've learned the value of endless energy and passion. She doesn't stop and keeps moving, and I think that's important in any candidate, and I try to emulate that myself. I think that was one thing that we both had in common, is that we had very energetic campaigns out there in the community, but also too from our other candidates, we had an excellent field of 5 candidates, and from my unbiased opinion, I thought we had one of the best fields in the city. Every one of us, we were very qualified, and we brought something very different to the table. We had different issues of expertise, transportation, management styles, experience. And so these forums that we attended were actually learning opportunities. I learned a great deal. And actually we would have forums where we would have combined forums with other districts, those were my favorite, because you got a little sampling of all across the city, and we talked about those commonalities. Those commonalities would come out in those discussions, but the approaches to handle them were different. So it was very enlightening.
And Ellen.
Yeah, well, I do think that we had one of the strongest fields in the entire city. Every candidate in this race brought a true strength and a true unique perspective. And we heard multiple times, I wish you guys were all running for different things so that we could vote for you all. And that was very flattering. And it's a great thing for Southwest Austinites to have that kind of choice that to choose from. And I have enjoyed this experience with Ed immensely. We have spent, like you said, many days and nights together, and I think we have grown to have a mutual respect for each other, even though we may differ in our approaches to the role of city government. I think that at the end of the day, Austinites want us to all be able to work together for the betterment of our city, and I hope we can continue this relationship farther past this election, because I think we both have unique things to offer.
Yeah. So District 8 has a number of large and sometimes vocal homeowners associations. And I'm curious if you can describe your conversations with those groups during the campaign and how you would work to keep them sort of included and engaged if you're elected. And Ellen, if you want to take that one first.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about Southwest Austin is we have a very family-centered district. We do have the highest rate of home ownership, and the homeowners associations, truly care about maintaining their quality of life. And we've gone to countless homeowners association meetings and also had forums there. And I think they were excited to see, I think that was probably the first time that they've ever had city council candidates speaking at homeowner association meetings. So they're excited to finally know who to call when they have an issue. They have very, like I said earlier, specific neighborhood needs. One neighborhood is concerned with sidewalks. One neighborhood is concerned with having brush cleared from their green belt. One neighborhood is concerned with having their potholes filled. And those are things that they feel like they have been overlooked in the current city government structure. And that's the kind of, so in order to keep them engaged, I think you have to continue to be accessible. They have my cell phone number, they have my personal email address. They're always going to know how to get a hold of me and how to let me know the needs that they're facing in their communities.
Ed.
Well, I think one of the things that I've been able to draw upon is I had experience as a director and president of Circle C HOA back 7-8 years ago, and that was a critical time for that neighborhood. We were reforming the HOA and taking it over from the developer and transferring to homeowner control, and that's a very large homeowners association, and there's a big difference between a homeowners association and a neighborhood association or an apartment association, and it's important to understand that difference. Homeowners associations can be great partners for the city if that relationship is handled well. The homeowners associations are often willing to take on some of the duties, maintenance duties, for example, that the city may not want, and so they can help us save money and the residents can be happy. They're very good partners in terms usually of making strides in water conservation. The residents are great at crime prevention programs and so forth, so they're very engaged within their community, so that's important. But it's also important, we have situations where you might have a Circle C or a Western Oaks butting up just across the highway from a Maple Run, which is a working class community where they don't have mandatory HOA dues. And that's a very different situation over there where folks are voluntarily paying into the system, and then when the families age and the parents age and move out, sometimes those neighborhood associations have no money at all. And so they require a complete different level of engagement. But because we're all there in the same region, our kids go to the same schools, we all drive on the same roads, and so it's important to understand how the different types of neighborhoods in the district relate, and I think I have that experience.
All right, so I want you to each imagine it's rush hour, you're in North Austin, but you have to get home. So you know you're going to be in the car for a while heading from north to south during rush hour. If you could put 3 people in that car with you, who would you put and what would you talk about with them? Ed, if you want to take that one first.
Well, it would, I'm assuming it'd be a very long conversation, so I'd have to entertain myself. I am a political junkie, so Chuck Todd, for example, from MSNBC, we could talk about elections and the minutiae of voting patterns and so forth. Jimmy Fallon, we might play a few games in the car, and Bruce Springsteen, because I'm sure that would be, he'd just unleash some pearls of wisdom that have had a positive influence on my life from the time I was about 14. So that'd be a pretty entertaining conversation, and I'd learn a few things along the way.
And Ellen?
All right, so anyone past or present, I would say I would love to be stuck in a car with Margaret Thatcher and pick her brain. I think she was an amazing woman and broke a lot of barriers, so I'd be interested to have a long conversation with her. I would say to take his lead on a musician, maybe someone like Ryan Adams, who my husband and I recently saw at ACL Live, and he was just an amazing musician and would love to learn more about him. And I think third, I would have to say my husband, because we haven't gotten to spend a whole lot of time together over the past several months, and I miss him.
Well, our time has gone by very quickly, faster than that ride from North Austin to South Austin. So we've come to the end of our time. I do have one last question for you.
Sure.
At the end of your term, what is the biggest mark you would like to have left on the district? And Ellen, if you want to take that one first.
I think the biggest mark from a policy standpoint, I'm really passionate about giving Austinites some relief when it comes to affordability. I want to see a 20% city homestead exemption passed. I want to see us getting a handle on our budget and reducing the tax rate so that people can afford to raise families in this city. And from a personal perspective, I want to know that I accomplished my goal of being a servant leader, of never forgetting that my bosses are the 80,000 constituents that live in District 8. I work for them and not the other way around, and that I have always approached this job from the perspective of how can I serve them the best.
And Ed?
I think 2 things, they may not sound like they're related, but they are affordability, the viability of homeownership. The district does have economic diversity right now. We have some working class areas, we have upper middle class and higher income areas, but that diversity is depleting rapidly, and the property tax issue is a main driver of that. I also favor a 20% homestead exemption and other things that we can do. We have to do something. It's a crisis. So keeping people in their homes, but ultimately at the end of the day, We need to survive this storm of growth that we're enduring. We're on the front lines in Southwest, and we need to preserve our quality of life. It doesn't do any good to preserve the viability of home ownership if your quality of life is depleting. We have beautiful open spaces. It is, in my view, the most beautiful area in the city and in Central Texas, and that's a charge to keep. So we have a balance that we have to walk to keep people in their homes and also protect the quality of life that we have, and that's going to be the major challenge over the next decade, I think.
Well, that is all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to both of you, Ed Scruggs and Ellen Troxclair.
Thank you.
All of the runoff conversations and our conversation with the newly elected candidates for Districts 2, 5, and 9 will be available on YouTube. Early voting in the runoff election starts December 1st. Election Day is December 16th. For KLRU, Leadership Austin, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and KUT, I'm Jennifer Staten. Thank you so much for watching.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.